Have you ever wandered along a quiet country path, perhaps feeling the crunch of gravel beneath your boots or the soft give of earth, and wondered about the stories hidden just beneath your feet? What if I told you that many of these seemingly random trails are not accidents of geography but intentional designs, ancient roads crafted with breathtaking precision to align with the stars, harness earth energies, and connect sacred sites across vast distances? These pathways, which we might dismiss as simple medieval footpaths, were in fact carefully engineered channels of spiritual power, geometric harmony, and celestial wisdom. For centuries, our ancestors saw the landscape not as empty space to be crossed, but as a living, sacred canvas. They designed roads that did more than simply take you from one village to another. They wove together the heavens and the earth, creating a network that resonated with meaning, ritual, and mystery. Imagine walking a route where every curve, every straight stretch, every marker stone was placed with intention, to capture the solstice sunrise, to amplify healing energies, or to guide pilgrims toward transformation. This was not just travel, it was participation in a cosmic order, a way to physically step into alignment with something far greater than everyday life. In this video, we're going to unravel these secrets together. We'll explore how ley lines, invisible threads of energy, shaped the paths beneath our feet. We'll decode the sacred geometry that turned simple journeys into spiritual experiences, and we'll stand in awe of the astronomical alignments that connected cathedrals, stone circles, and mountain peaks into one grand design. You'll discover that these roads were threads in a vast, hidden tapestry, one that connected medieval believers to the rhythms of the universe, the pulse of the earth, and the depth of their own faith. So come with us on this journey back in time. Let's walk these ancient roads not as they appear today, but as they were meant to be experienced, as corridors of wonder, meaning, and magic. To understand the true nature of these ancient roads, we must first step back into a world without borders as we know them, a world where the landscape itself was alive with meaning. For our ancestors, the earth was not a resource to be owned or a blank space to be crossed, but a sacred being pulsing with energy and spirit. Every hill, river, and forest was a character in a grand living story. In this worldview, a road could never be just a strip of dirt for getting from one place to another. It was a deliberate act of connection, a line drawn in conversation with the cosmos. These pathways were physical expressions of a deep, spiritual understanding of order and harmony. They were built to mirror the heavens above, aligning with the majestic sweep of the sun on a solstice or the precise rising of a significant star. In Celtic Europe, for example, certain tracks were designed so that on the morning of a major festival like Beltane, the first rays of the sun would travel the entire length of the path, illuminating it like a fiery arrow and blessing everyone who walked upon it. This wasn't just beautiful symbolism, it was a way of weaving celestial time into the fabric of daily human life. These roads connected more than just places. They connected ideas, linking the realms of the living and the dead by joining villages to ancient burial mounds, or connecting the human community to the divine by leading to sacred groves and spring-fed temples. The journey itself became a moving meditation. To walk these paths was to participate in a ritual, to trace a line of prayer across the body of the earth. Each step was an intention, and the entire route was a carefully maintained channel, believed to conduct spiritual energy and facilitate communication with the forces of nature. This profound purpose is why these pathways were crafted with such painstaking care and preserved across countless generations, long before the first medieval mapmaker ever drew a line to denote a king's territory. They were mapping something far more eternal. This idea of an invisible grid shaping our visible world is truly captivating. While ancient cultures may have intuitively sensed these alignments, the term ley line itself is a relatively modern invention, coined in the 1920s by an Englishman named Alfred Watkins. A keen amateur archaeologist and photographer, Watkins was surveying the Herefordshire countryside when he had a remarkable revelation. Gazing at the landscape, he suddenly saw it not as a random collection of hills and valleys, but as a crisscrossing network of perfectly straight tracks, all connecting ancient sites in a vast geometric web. He described it as a flood of ancestral memory, a sudden understanding that everything from prehistoric burial mounds and stone circles to medieval churches and old crossroads inns were deliberately placed along these energetic pathways. He believed these lines were old straight tracks, forgotten trading routes used by our ancestors, and that they represented a sophisticated form of prehistoric surveying. Watkins's theory, detailed in his book The Old Straight Track, was initially met with skepticism from the academic establishment, who dismissed these alignments as mere coincidence, the inevitable result of having enough points on a map that some will eventually line up. But the idea captured the public's imagination and refused to die. It was later adopted and expanded upon by various groups, particularly in the 1960s and 70s, who reinterpreted these lines not as old trade routes, but as channels of a mysterious earth energy, akin to the Chinese concept of dragon lines or kai. Proponents of this view suggest that these energy currents can be detected through dowsing or felt as a palpable vibration, and that sacred sites were built upon these powerful nodes to harness their power for healing, prayer, and spiritual connection. When you examine a map of medieval Europe, the correlation is often striking. The Camino de Santiago, one of the most famous pilgrimage routes in the world, doesn't meander aimlessly across northern Spain. Its path follows a remarkably straight alignment for long stretches, connecting countless churches, monasteries, and holy wells that are themselves built atop even older sacred sites, suggesting a continuous recognition of this specific pathway's significance. In England, the St. Michael Line is a famous alleged ley, said to run across the country, connecting a series of dedicated to the Archangel Michael, often perched on dramatic hilltops, and many of these sites are linked by old, straight roads. Skeptics rightly urge caution, pointing out that humans are pattern-seeking creatures and that we can find significance in random clusters. They argue that practical concerns like geography, following ridge lines for dry travel, or the path of least resistance between 2 points are a more logical explanation for many of these alignments. Yet, even if we set aside the more metaphysical interpretations, the sheer number of these straight alignments across different cultures and centuries points to a profound human desire to find order in chaos. Whether these lines carried literal energy or simply represented a symbolic connecting of sacred dots, they provided a framework for understanding the world. They transformed a seemingly random landscape into a meaningful, interconnected whole, a map not just of places but of belief itself. This invisible grid, this hidden architecture of the land, hints at a lost science of geomancy, the art of reading the Earth's energies that guided the placement of so much more than just roads. But the story doesn't end with the invisible lines of energy crisscrossing the Earth. These terrestrial pathways often reached for the heavens themselves, designed as terrestrial mirrors of the celestial dance above. In medieval societies, the collaboration between astronomer priests and master builders was essential, resulting in roads that functioned as vast, open-air calendars and cosmic observatories. The famous Ridgeway in England, one of the oldest roads in Europe, provides a stunning example. This ancient trackway is oriented with such precision that on the dawn of the winter solstice, the rising sun appears to travel directly along its path, its rays illuminating the entire route and striking specific burial mounds and stone circles positioned alongside it. This was no accident. It was a deliberate act of engineering that transformed a simple path into a solar calendar, marking the year's shortest day and the symbolic return of the light. This alignment provided a practical, communal function, signaling the time for essential agricultural activities and preparing for the deep winter, but it also held profound spiritual significance. The road became a stage for a cosmic event, allowing everyone walking it to physically participate in the turning of the seasons. This principle extended beyond rural trackways to the very heart of medieval spiritual architecture. Consider the magnificent Cathedral of Chartres in France. The roads leading to this Gothic masterpiece were not laid out randomly. They were carefully aligned so that on specific holy days, the sun would perform a miraculous spectacle. As it passed through particular windows at a precise angle, a single beam of light would travel across the cathedral's vast interior floor, dramatically illuminating a specific altar, a carved icon, or a mark on the labyrinth set into the stone. For the medieval pilgrim traveling the road toward Chartres, their physical journey was a prelude to this celestial light show. Their arrival was timed to witness this event, a moment where heaven and earth seemed to touch, validating their faith and their arduous travel. This wasn't merely symbolic theater. It was a tangible demonstration of a universe governed by divine order and mathematical harmony. The road and the cathedral were two parts of a single instrument designed to capture and manifest celestial power. By walking these astronomically aligned roads, ordinary people became active participants in a cosmic dance. Their daily travel, whether for trade, pilgrimage, or visiting a neighboring village, was interwoven with the grand rhythms of the universe. A farmer taking a shortcut along the Ridgeway during the solstice would be momentarily bathed in the significance of the event. A merchant arriving at Chartres during the feast of St. John would witness the sun's beam as a personal blessing. This integration of astronomy, travel, and ritual created a deep, lived interdependence between human activity and the natural world. The road was the thread that connected them, a constant reminder that their lives were part of a much larger, ordered, and meaningful cosmos. This sophisticated understanding of the skies, etched into the very earth we walk on, reveals a level of planning and spiritual intention that we are only now beginning to fully appreciate. Now, if ley lines represent the invisible energetic grid and astronomical alignments connect us to the cosmos, sacred geometry provides the actual mathematical language used to write this divine blueprint onto the earth itself. This is the belief that certain shapes, patterns, and numerical ratios are not just man-made inventions, but are fundamental principles of creation, echoing in everything from the spiral of a galaxy to the structure of a snowflake. For medieval builders, incorporating these sacred ratios into a road wasn't about aesthetics alone. It was about constructing a conduit for harmony, a pathway that would literally resonate with the underlying order of the universe. They worked with proportions like the golden ratio, approximately 1.618 to 1, a ratio found throughout nature in seashells, flower petals, and even the human body. They also utilized sequences like the Fibonacci, where each number is the sum of the two preceding it, creating a progression that models explosive, organic growth. Imagine a pilgrim on a route like the Via Francigena traveling from England to Rome. The distances between major resting stops, shrines, or hospices were often not random. They might be spaced 1 mile, then 2, then 3, then 5 following the Fibonacci sequence. This created a natural rhythm to the journey, a pattern that subconsciously eased the traveler's fatigue and perhaps even aligned their own biological rhythms with the path itself, enhancing the spiritual experience. This wasn't just happenstance, it was intentional design, a form of vibrational architecture where the very length of the road carried meaning. This geometric precision didn't stop at the road's edge. It was a complete system that integrated the pathway with the monuments it connected. The great cathedrals themselves were masterclasses in sacred geometry. Chartres Cathedral, for instance, is famously designed using the proportions of the golden ratio in its floor plan, the layout of its windows, and the height of its spires. Therefore, the road leading to Chartres wasn't just a way to get there. It was the final approach to a geometric powerhouse. The traveler was moving from a path imbued with harmonic proportion toward a building constructed with the same divine mathematics, creating a seamless and amplified sacred landscape. The geometry acted as a kind of spiritual amplifier believed to elevate prayer, facilitate healing, and make divine connection more accessible. Circles representing unity and eternity were woven into the patterns of roundabouts or the circuits of processional paths around a church. Triangles symbolizing harmony and balance often defined the relationship between three significant sites, creating a powerful triad on the landscape. Even the pentagram, a complex five-pointed star, can be found in the alignments between certain ancient sites and the roads that link them, each point representing an element and the whole symbolizing divine protection and microcosmic order. For the medieval mind, these patterns were far from arbitrary abstractions. They were a practical application of a deeply held worldview that God was the great geometer, and to build with these shapes and ratios was to participate in the act of creation itself, to make heaven manifest on earth. Walking a road laid out with these principles was therefore a profoundly transformative act. It was a moving meditation through a living, breathing mathematical prayer. The traveler wasn't just passing through the countryside. They were tracing a line of sacred intent, their footsteps activating a preordained pattern of harmony and meaning. This fusion of esoteric belief and practical engineering reveals a level of sophistication we are only beginning to decode, showing us that these ancient roads were, in their own right, some of the most profound spiritual artifacts ever built. Pilgrimage in the medieval world was so much more than a long walk to a holy site. It was a meticulously engineered spiritual ordeal, a transformative journey where the path itself was the true teacher. Routes like the Via Francigena, snaking from Canterbury all the way to Rome, or the network of paths converging on Canterbury Cathedral in England, were designed with profound intentionality. The destination was important. Of course, the shrine of St. Thomas Becket or the tomb of St. Peter held immense power, but the real magic, the true transformation, happened along the road itself. This was a physical and metaphysical landscape of purification, where every mile was meant to strip away the worldly self, layer by layer, through fatigue, reflection, and encounter. The architecture of this transformation was built right into the route. Pilgrims didn't just find random inns and villages, they encountered a carefully sequenced series of spiritual waypoints. A traveler might come across a small chapel dedicated to a specific saint, positioned precisely at a point where fatigue was greatest, offering a moment of respite and prayer. A simple stone cross marking a hilltop might signify the halfway point, both geographically and symbolically, urging the pilgrim to reflect on their progress not just in miles, but in spiritual readiness. Holy wells, often ancient sites of veneration long before Christianity, provided not just fresh water, but were believed to offer healing and cleansing of sin. Each of these landmarks was a chapter in a story, a lesson in perseverance, faith, and humility. Walking this path was like moving through the stations of the cross. It was a participatory drama where your own aching feet and dusty clothes were part of the script. This physical hardship was not an unfortunate side effect, it was the entire point. The blistered feet, the exposure to the elements, the constant threat of bandits or illness, all of it mirrored the inner struggle of the soul against sin and distraction. The outer journey was a direct reflection of the inner one. By willingly embracing this difficulty, the pilgrim enacted a form of penance and purification, believing that the very act of suffering on the road brought them closer to God. Reaching the destination was the culmination of this process, a moment of arrival where the purified soul could finally receive the full grace of the sacred site. The ecstasy of seeing the spires of Santiago de Compostela on the horizon was amplified 1,000-fold by the memory of every painful step it took to get there. This entire experience was framed within a powerful geometric and symbolic framework. The distances between these spiritual milestones were often not random. A route might have 7 major stopping points, echoing the 7 deadly sins or the 7 virtues, creating a journey of confronting and overcoming each one. Another might be divided into 12 segments, reflecting the 12 apostles or the 12 tribes of Israel, making the pilgrim a participant in a biblical narrative. The path itself often followed those mysterious ley lines, believed to channel terrestrial energy, or was aligned with celestial events, so that a pilgrim might set off at a new moon and arrive at a full moon, their journey syncopated with the rhythms of the cosmos. This turned the entire roadway into a vast, open-air cathedral without walls, where the sky was the ceiling and the path was the nave. Every step was a prayer, every sunrise a stained glass window, and every mountain pass a trial of faith. The pilgrimage road was the most powerful example of how medieval people used the very landscape as an instrument of spiritual transformation, a physical path designed to lead to a metaphysical change. Now, let's turn our attention to one of the most iconic and enduring examples of a sacred pathway, the Camino de Santiago. This sprawling network of trails, converging from all corners of Europe onto the cathedral in Santiago de Compostela, Spain, is far more than a simple collection of hiking routes. It is a living museum of medieval spiritual engineering, a physical manifestation of faith where every stone, every mile, and every horizon was imbued with intention. For over 1,000 years, pilgrims have walked these paths, but few may realize the profound geometric and celestial intelligence woven into the very fabric of their journey. The Camino is not a random wander across the landscape. It is a deliberate, calculated design that harmonizes the terrestrial with the cosmic. Medieval minds saw the dusty road beneath their feet as an earthly reflection of the celestial river above, the Milky Way galaxy. They called it the Via Lactea, and they believed it was a divine scattering of stars, a heavenly roadmap placed by God Himself to guide the faithful to the earthly resting place of the Apostle St. James. This wasn't just a pretty metaphor, it was a fundamental principle of its alignment. The main route, the French Way, follows a trajectory that mirrors the Milky Way's path across the Iberian sky, creating a powerful symbolic resonance where walking the earth was synonymous with walking among the stars. This cosmic connection transformed the pilgrims' plodding steps into a participation in the grand architecture of the universe. This celestial guidance was matched by an equally profound application of sacred geometry on the ground. The placement of infrastructure along the Camino reveals a meticulous attention to rhythm and proportion, designed to support the pilgrim in both body and spirit. The distances between essential waypoints, churches, monasteries, hospitals, and bridges were often calculated using sacred ratios. For instance, the spacing between major rest stops or refugios frequently corresponds to numbers in the Fibonacci sequence. A pilgrim might walk 1 mile to the first cross, 1 mile to the next shrine, then 2 miles to a monastery, 3 to a river crossing, and 5 to a significant town. This creates a natural, organic rhythm to the journey that subconsciously aligns with patterns found throughout nature, from the arrangement of leaves on a stem to the spiral of a nautilus shell. This wasn't just about logistics, it was about vibrational harmony. Walking this rhythmic pattern was believed to ease physical exhaustion, lull the mind into a meditative state, and open the heart to spiritual reception. The geometry of the path itself became a tool for transformation, guiding the walker through a predetermined course of physical challenge and spiritual renewal. Further deepening this experience is the Camino's fascinating relationship with the concept of ley lines. Many stretches of the path, particularly its straightest sections, are said to run directly along these alleged channels of Earth energy. Proponents of this view suggest that the countless churches and cathedrals along the route, such as the magnificent one in Burgos or the humble Romanesque chapel in Unate, were strategically built on powerful energetic nodes or where multiple ley lines intersected. Walking the Camino, therefore, was not just a scenic hike, it was a journey along a current of terrestrial power. Pilgrims believed that by treading this path, they were absorbing this energy, purifying their auras, and connecting to a force that had been recognized and venerated for millennia, long before the Christian tradition adopted the route. This fusion of practical travel infrastructure with esoteric earth mysteries created a multifaceted pilgrimage where every step could be felt on a physical, emotional, and energetic level. The Camino was a conduit, and the pilgrims were both the recipients and the conductors of its ancient power. This incredible synthesis of astronomy, geometry, and telluric energy belief points to a staggering level of sophistication behind what might otherwise appear to be a simple dirt path. The builders and stewards of the Camino monastic orders like the Benedictines and the Knights Templar were not just road engineers, they were spiritual cartographers mapping a journey of the soul onto the physical world. They understood that the external landscape could shape the internal one. By crafting a path that resonated with cosmic order and earthly harmony, they created the perfect conditions for a profound inner pilgrimage. This detailed, holistic planning is what has made the Camino endure for centuries. It is not merely a route to a destination, but a destination in and of itself, a carefully designed instrument for faith, community, and personal metamorphosis, where the journey itself truly becomes the goal. While the Camino de Santiago represents a sprawling network of spiritual pathways, England's Ridgeway offers a more primal and equally profound example of celestial alignment etched directly into the chalk downs. This is not a road built in the conventional sense, but a trackway so ancient that it seems to have been born from the land itself, worn deep into the turf by countless generations of feet, hooves, and wheels over more than 5,000 years. As one of the oldest continuously used roads in Europe, its origins stretch back to the Neolithic period, and walking it today feels like tracing a line directly back through time. But this path is far more than a historical artifact. It is a monumental solar instrument, a testament to how our ancestors wove the very fabric of the cosmos into their daily travel. The genius of the Ridgeway's design reveals itself most spectacularly during the solstices. On the dawn of the winter solstice, the shortest and often darkest day of the year, the rising sun performs a precise and dramatic spectacle for those positioned along certain stretches of the path. The sun does not simply appear over the horizon. It emerges in perfect alignment with the road itself, its first golden rays streaming directly along the corridor of the trackway as if illuminating a runway to the heavens. This light show was not meant for an audience sitting still. It was designed for people in motion. For a traveler walking the Ridgeway at that moment, the sun would have traveled directly with them, its light flooding the path ahead and striking specific, strategically placed monuments. Ancient burial mounds or barrows and mysterious stone circles positioned alongside the route are suddenly bathed in this low, intense light, transforming them from silent earthworks into activated, glowing altars. This was no happy coincidence of topography. It was a deliberate and brilliant piece of landscape engineering, turning the entire road into a functional solar calendar that marked the pivotal turning point of the year with unerring accuracy. This alignment provided immense practical value for medieval and earlier societies. For farmers and herders, the solstice event was a critical marker in the agricultural cycle, signaling the deepest point of winter and the imminent gradual return of the sun, a promise of warmer days and new growth to come. It was a communal clock, a shared celestial event that dictated the rhythm of life, from when to slaughter and preserve livestock to when to begin preparing fields for the spring sowing. But its purpose ran far deeper than mere scheduling. This road was also a stage for powerful rituals and ceremonies. We can imagine communities gathering at these illuminated barrows at dawn to perform rites meant to honor their ancestors, appeal to the gods for the sun's return, or simply to reaffirm their connection to the cycles of nature. The physical act of walking the sun-lit path became a participatory ritual, a way to literally step into the cosmic drama and ensure the continuity of life and season. The road was the conduit that made this intimate conversation with the cosmos possible. The Ridgeway's significance is further amplified by the sacred sites it connects, forming a powerful geometric network across southern England. This ancient trackway doesn't wander aimlessly. It forms a purposeful line linking some of the most important Neolithic and Bronze Age monuments in the region. It serves as a direct artery to the massive stone circles of Avebury, a complex even older than Stonehenge. It runs near the breathtaking Uffington White Horse, a giant, stylized horse figure carved into the chalk hillside that is best viewed from the path above. It connects to Wayland's Smithy, an impressive Neolithic long barrow shrouded in legend. The straightness of its key sections is a clear indicator of intentional planning. Unlike a path that meanders to follow every contour of the land, the Ridgeway often runs boldly straight across ridges, sacrificing the ease of lower, sheltered valleys for the commanding views and, crucially, the unimpeded sight lines to the horizon necessary for astronomical observation. This choice reveals a priority that went beyond simple convenience. It was about maintaining a sacred alignment. Ultimately, the Ridgeway stands as a masterclass in holistic living. It refused to separate the practical from the spiritual, the daily commute from the divine connection. It was a vital trade route, a highway for moving livestock, and a path for communication between communities. Simultaneously, it was a celestial calendar, a ritual processional way, and a permanent monument to humanity's place within a vast, ordered universe. A shepherd moving his flock along the Ridgeway, a trader carrying goods, or a family visiting a neighboring village, all were unconsciously participating in this grand design. Their everyday journeys were harmonized with the solar cycles, their lives given a deeper context and rhythm by the road beneath their feet. The Ridgeway exemplifies the deepest truth about these ancient pathways. They were not built upon the land, but woven into it, a seamless integration of human necessity, spiritual yearning, and cosmic wonder. To truly grasp the genius behind these ancient pathways, we must understand the worldview of the geomancer, the master of earth divination, who saw the landscape not as inert matter, but as a living, breathing entity pulsing with unseen currents. This was the art of geomancy, a sophisticated practice far removed from simple superstition. For these medieval specialists, the entire world was a text to be read, and every hill, valley, and spring was a sentence written in a language of energy and form. Their role was to interpret this language, to determine the most auspicious locations for everything from building a home to plotting the course of a road. They operated on the principle that the Earth itself possessed a vital force, often called the telluric current or dragon lines, and that these energies could be either beneficial or harmful to human activity. A road, as a permanent scar upon the land and a conduit for human movement, had to be in harmony with these forces, not in conflict with them. This meant the path of a road was rarely a simple straight line between 2 points on a map. A geomancer might instruct builders to curve a road gently to embrace a specific beneficial energy vortex, perhaps indicated by a particularly healthy and ancient grove of trees or a spring with remarkably clear water. Conversely, the same expert might demand a detour to avoid a malevolent or stagnant energy, often associated with barren ground, treacherous swamps, or sites of historical tragedy. This practice explains the seemingly illogical meanders found in many old tracks that could have easily been straight. It wasn't a lack of engineering skill, it was a different priority system, one that valued spiritual harmony and the well-being of travelers as highly as efficiency. The road was designed to protect and nourish those who walked it, shielding them from harmful influences and guiding them through zones of positive energy. The tools of the geomancer were an extension of this sensitive perception. While some undoubtedly possessed an intuitive gift, others employed physical instruments to detect these subtle energies. The dowsing rod, a simple forked branch often made from hazel or willow, was a common device. Held lightly in the hands, it was believed to twitch or dip when crossing an underground water source or a powerful energy lay. Similarly, a pendulum, a weighted object on a string, might be used to map out the flow of energy across a proposed route, its circles or ellipses indicating the quality and strength of the forces at play. These were not seen as magical tricks but as practical surveying tools, finely tuned to the geomancer's intent and used to translate the invisible world into a practical blueprint for construction. The goal was always the same, to find the most harmonious path, the line of least resistance not just topographically, but energetically. This deep reverence for natural features meant that roads were frequently aligned to incorporate sacred geography. A geomantic route would intentionally curve to include a view of a powerful mountain peak considered the abode of gods or spirits. It might be designed to run parallel to a sacred river for a stretch, harnessing its purifying and life-giving energy. The entrance to a cave, seen as a portal to the underworld or a place of profound mystery, might become a focal point, with the road approaching it with ceremonial reverence before continuing on its way. These alignments were a form of respectful conversation with the land. The road wasn't imposed upon the terrain. It was a respectful negotiation, a way of asking permission and weaving the human need for travel into the existing sacred tapestry of the place. The resulting network was therefore a hybrid creation, part human engineering, part natural formation, that felt organically rooted to the landscape rather than brutally carved through it. This holistic approach to design reveals a medieval worldview that seems strikingly modern in its ecological awareness. Humanity was not seen as separate from or superior to nature, but as an integrated participant within a living system. To build a road without consulting the geomantic principles would have been considered arrogant and foolish, like building a house without consulting the architect's plans. It risked disrupting the delicate balance of the local environment and inviting misfortune upon all who used it. The geomancer was the essential mediator, ensuring that human expansion and movement occurred in a state of balance with the natural world. This profound interconnection between spirituality, practicality, and ecology is what gave these ancient roads their enduring power and presence. They feel right because they were designed with a deep respect for the soul of the land itself, creating routes that are as much a part of the natural order as the rivers and ridges they follow. The principles that guided the placement of solitary pathways across the countryside found their ultimate expression in the very heart of medieval life, the planned city. Here, the sacred geometry wasn't just a line between 2 points. It was expanded into a full, living blueprint, transforming entire communities into microcosms of the divine order. A city like Chartres in France is a textbook example of this celestial urbanism. The entire town wasn't just built around its magnificent cathedral. The cathedral was the spiritual and geometric engine around which everything else was precisely arranged. The main roads leading into Chartres weren't laid out for convenience alone. They were carefully aligned so that on the summer solstice, the sun would rise directly along their axis, flooding the streets with light that would eventually pour into the cathedral's western portals. This wasn't an urban accident. It was a deliberate act of engineering that brought the cosmos into the daily commute of every citizen, turning a simple walk to the market into a participation in a solar ritual. This meticulous planning was driven by a powerful theological idea, the desire to create an earthly mirror of the heavenly Jerusalem described in the Bible. Medieval planners sought to build a city on earth that reflected the perfection, harmony, and divine proportion of the city of God. This meant applying sacred ratios to everything from the width of the streets to the placement of public squares. The main processional route, often leading directly from a city gate to the cathedral door, would frequently be laid out using the golden ratio. The distances between major landmarks, the market cross, a key church, the town hall, might follow a Fibonacci sequence, creating a rhythm of sacred numbers that residents would subconsciously experience as they moved through their city. Even the placement of the city's defensive gates could correspond to cardinal directions, aligning the entire community with the fundamental geometry of the cosmos, north, south, east, and west. This design philosophy turned the city itself into a spiritual instrument. During major religious festivals, these geometric principles were activated through powerful public rituals. On Corpus Christi, for example, the entire population would participate in a procession that wound along these predetermined sacred routes. The path wasn't random, it would stop at specific stations. A chapel here, a cross there, a holy well. Each station positioned at a point of geometric significance, perhaps where 2 ley lines were believed to cross or at a specific harmonic interval from the cathedral. As the procession moved, carrying relics and chanting prayers, they were quite literally tracing a prayer across the urban landscape, blessing the city and reinforcing its sacred architecture through collective movement. The city wasn't just a backdrop for worship. The city itself was an essential part of the liturgy. The legacy of this sacred urban planning is remarkably persistent. If you look at an aerial map of a city like Canterbury in England, you can still see the ghost of this medieval mindscape. The main thoroughfares still lead directly to the cathedral precincts, following the same paths that pilgrims walked 800 years ago. The layout of the streets in the oldest quarters often retains its original, non-grid-like, yet curiously purposeful geometry, reflecting a time when a road was bent to embrace a sacred site rather than to maximize traffic flow. This endurance is a testament to the power and functionality of the original design. These layouts worked, not just spiritually but socially, creating urban environments that felt harmonious, purposeful, and deeply connected to a larger meaning. The medieval citizen didn't just live in a city, they inhabited a model of the universe, a daily reminder that their community was a small but integral part of a vast, beautiful, and intelligently designed cosmos. But these ancient pathways were more than just lines of energy and geometry. They were also rich with story and symbol, a narrative written in stone and wood for every traveler to read. As you walked these sacred routes, you were never truly alone. The road itself spoke to you, offering guidance, warning, and comfort through a language of carefully placed markers and milestones. Far from being simple signposts denoting distance, these objects were profound spiritual waypoints, each one a deliberate piece of a much larger symbolic tapestry. A weathered stone cross at a fork in the path wasn't just a directional aid, it was a permanent prayer, a plea for divine protection over those faced with a choice. A statue of a saint worn smooth by the touch of countless passing hands served as a tactile connection to the holy, a moment of blessing embedded directly into the journey. These markers transformed the act of travel from a mere physical effort into a walking meditation, a participatory story where every step brought a new chapter of moral and spiritual reflection. The placement of these objects was a science in itself, governed by the same sacred principles that shaped the roads they adorned. They were rarely random. A marker might be positioned precisely at the intersection of two powerful ley lines, creating a concentrated node of energy that pilgrims could pause and absorb. Others were spaced at intervals that resonated with sacred numerology. On certain routes to Canterbury, for instance, waymarkers appeared every 7 miles, a deliberate echo of the 7 deadly sins or the 7 heavenly virtues. This meant that a pilgrim, with each passing milestone, was unconsciously measuring their progress not in distance, but in spiritual terms. Were they walking away from pride and greed with every step? Were they moving closer to charity and humility? The rhythm of the journey itself became a constant, subtle reminder of the inner transformation they sought, turning the long and often arduous road into a linear monastery, a moving confessional where the landscape itself was the abbot. This symbolism extended into dynamic interaction with the cosmos. Some markers were engineered as simple yet precise astronomical instruments. A standing stone, carefully angled, might cast a shadow that only touched a specific carved symbol on the ground on the morning of the equinox. A hole carved through a wayside cross could frame the rising sun on the feast day of the saint to whom it was dedicated. These were not just pretty effects, they were functional calendrical devices, providing travelers with a tangible connection to the turning of the seasons and the cycles of the liturgical year. For a medieval journeyer, encountering this alignment was a moment of magic and confirmation, a sign that their path was in harmony with the universe, that heaven was quite literally shining its approval upon their endeavor. It was a deeply personal experience of the divine order that governed all things. The types of markers varied widely, each with its own specific vocabulary. In Celtic regions, intricately carved Sheila na gig figures, though their exact meaning is debated, were often placed on church walls near roads, perhaps acting as protective talismans against evil spirits for those entering or leaving a sacred boundary. Wayside shrines, sometimes no more than a small niche in a wall holding a candle and a crude icon, offered a moment for quiet prayer and left a lasting impression of community and shared faith, knowing countless others had stopped at that exact spot. Even the humble milestone could be imbued with meaning, its Roman numeral often corresponding to a significant number in local folklore or scripture. Every one of these objects, from the grandest cross to the simplest cairn of stones added by passing pilgrims, was a word in the silent story of the road. Together, they formed a continuous narrative of guidance and grace, ensuring that no one walked the sacred path alone, but was instead accompanied by the wisdom, warnings, and blessings of those who had walked it centuries before. While the grand design of sacred geometry and celestial alignment provided the vision, it was often the quiet, disciplined work of monastic orders that brought these plans to life, turning spiritual blueprints into tangible pathways of stone and earth. Monasteries were far more than secluded retreats for prayer. They were dynamic centers of industry, learning, and engineering, and their role in constructing and maintaining the medieval road network was absolutely pivotal. Orders like the Benedictines, with their famous motto Ora et Labora, prayer and work, and the more austere Cistercians saw manual labor as a form of devotion. Building a bridge or paving a muddy track was not just a civic duty, it was an act of piety, a way of easing the journey for pilgrims and thus facilitating their salvation. This mindset transformed these religious communities into some of the most powerful and effective infrastructure agencies of the Middle Ages. These monasteries didn't just happen to be near roads, they were strategically placed to serve as vital hubs along major pilgrimage routes. Think of them as the spiritual service stations of the medieval world. A weary traveler on the Via Francigena or a road to Santiago would find not just shelter within monastery walls, but also food, medical care, and spiritual guidance. The monks provided a safe haven in an often dangerous and unpredictable world, but their role was profoundly active, not passive. They were the permanent guardians of the route. A specific community of monks might be responsible for maintaining a certain stretch of road, clearing it of bandits and overgrowth, and ensuring its bridges remained standing after winter floods. This constant upkeep was essential, as a well-maintained road was a direct reflection of a community's piety and charity. By facilitating the pilgrim's physical journey, the monks believed they were directly participating in the pilgrim's spiritual one. But the monks were not mere maintenance crews. They were also master planners who applied their deep scholarly knowledge to the very design of the pathways. Within monastery libraries, ancient texts on geometry, astronomy, and even classical engineering were preserved and studied. This knowledge was then applied with spiritual intention. There are documented cases where the access road to a monastery was deliberately aligned so that on the feast day of the order's patron saint, the rising sun would appear to crown the road itself, its light leading directly to the abbey church's main entrance. This transformed the simple act of approach into a moment of celestial theater, a personal welcome from the heavens for every visitor arriving on that holy day. Furthermore, the monks were often the custodians of local law, including knowledge of purported ley lines and geomantic principles. They frequently chose to build their own monasteries at locations already recognized as powerful energy nodes, and the roads connecting these sites were then laid out to follow these invisible currents, believing it would amplify the spiritual experience of the approach. The physical infrastructure they built was a testament to their engineering skill and dedication. While we might picture medieval roads as simple dirt tracks, monastic orders were responsible for some of the most advanced roadwork of the era. They constructed sturdy stone bridges that defied powerful rivers, built raised causeways across treacherous marshes using intricate layers of timber and gravel, and paved particularly difficult sections with stone to prevent them from becoming impassable quagmires. Each of these projects was a monumental undertaking requiring vast resources, skilled labor, and long-term commitment. A bridge, in particular, was more than a convenience. It was a potent symbol of connection between communities, between the human and the divine, and between the sin of the world and the redemption offered by the Church on the other side. This holistic effort, combining hospitality, spiritual intentionality, and practical engineering, meant that the monastic contribution fundamentally shaped the medieval experience of travel. The roads they built and maintained were not neutral spaces. They were instruments of faith designed to guide the body and the soul safely through a perilous world towards a sacred destination. The rhythm of a pilgrimage was set by the distance between these monastic way stations, and the spiritual comfort they provided was as crucial as the physical rest. In essence, the monks wired the landscape for grace, ensuring that the journey itself became a continuous and supported act of devotion, forever linking their legacy to the very paths beneath our feet. This profound connection to the landscape meant that the natural world itself was the original architect, providing the sacred nodes that human road builders would later connect. Rather than seeing mountains, forests, or springs as obstacles to be conquered or avoided, medieval cultures viewed them as powerful, sentient beings, divine anchors in the living tapestry of the earth. A towering peak wasn't just a geological formation, it was a reaching finger of the gods, a place where heaven and earth met. An ancient, gnarled forest wasn't a mere collection of trees, it was a realm of deep mystery, home to spirits and ancestral memory. A spring bubbling up from the dark earth wasn't simply a source of water, it was a direct vein of life-giving, healing energy from the world's heart. These places were inherently sacred, charged with a presence that demanded reverence, and the roads were designed not to disturb them, but to pay homage by linking them together in a grand, geometric conversation. The patterns that emerged from this practice were often breathtaking in their complexity and intention. One of the most compelling examples is the concept of a spiritual corridor, where a road was designed specifically to create a direct energetic link between two powerful natural nodes. Imagine a path built solely to connect a secluded healing spring, known for its restorative waters, to a hilltop temple dedicated to a goddess of health. The road itself became a channel, a conduit that allowed the healing energy of the spring to flow symbolically, and they believed actually toward the temple, and conversely, the divine blessings from the temple to reach the spring. Traveling this road was therefore an act of moving through a charged field of energy, where every step amplified the pilgrim's own prayers for healing or renewal. This was geomancy in its purest form, using the path to manipulate and direct the perceived energies of the land for spiritual benefit. On a grander scale, the alignment of three or more of these natural landmarks could create vast, invisible geometric shapes across the landscape, turning entire regions into sacred diagrams. In certain parts of Britain, for instance, the relationship between a prominent mountain, a sacred lake, and a large, isolated standing stone forms a perfect isosceles triangle. A medieval road system would often trace the lines of this triangle, connecting these points not necessarily because it was the easiest route, but because it completed the sacred circuit. In more complex networks, 5 significant natural features, perhaps a hill fort, a river source, a waterfall, a cave, and a forest, could be found to form a pentagram. The roads linking them would then trace this star-shaped pattern across the countryside. For those who could read this hidden map, the entire world was revealed as an intricate, intentionally designed cosmos, with the roads providing the lines that connected the stars in this terrestrial constellation. Moving between these points was akin to walking a labyrinth. It was a ritual journey that allowed the traveler to tap into the concentrated vitality believed to exist at the junctions of these lines. Beyond the esoteric, this practice had immensely practical navigational benefits, seamlessly blending spiritual belief with survival savvy. In an age before detailed cartography, natural landmarks were the ultimate guideposts. A road engineered to provide a constant panoramic view of a distinctive mountain peak meant a traveler could always reorient themselves, no matter how unfamiliar the surrounding woods might be. A path that deliberately curved to run along a ridge crest offered not just a dry route above the valley bogs, but also a commanding vantage point to see the next sacred node on the horizon, a lone, massive oak tree marking a ford across a river, or a dramatic rock outcrop signifying an upcoming crossroads. This integration of navigation and veneration meant that the journey was constantly reinforced with meaning. The mountain was both a spiritual beacon and a practical guide, the sacred spring was both a place of prayer and a vital source of fresh water. The road honored the landmark, and the landmark, in return, protected and guided the traveler. This holistic approach reveals an ecological spirituality that stands in stark contrast to later periods of history where the environment was seen as a resource to be dominated. The medieval road builder worked in partnership with the genius loci, the spirit of the place. They asked, how can we fit our path into this sacred landscape? Rather than, how can we force the landscape to accommodate our path? The resulting network was one of harmony and deep respect. The road would bend to embrace a venerable grove, it would dip to pay respects to a spring, and it would climb to salute a mountain. It was a dialogue, not a monologue. This is why walking these ancient tracks today feels so fundamentally different from walking a modern road. They do not slice through the land, they flow with it, a testament to a time when humanity saw itself not as separate from nature, but as a humble participant within its majestic, intelligent, and deeply sacred design. The tools they wielded might seem humble to our modern eyes, but in the hands of a skilled medieval surveyor, they were instruments of profound power. The astrolabe, a complex brass model of the heavens, allowed them to take precise bearings from the sun and stars, translating celestial movements into terrestrial angles. The groma, a simple yet brilliant device of crossed arms and hanging plumb bobs, enabled them to sight perfectly straight lines and establish precise right angles across rolling countryside. With nothing more than a calibrated chain for measuring distance and these ingenious tools for establishing direction, these early engineers could plot a course across miles of varied terrain with astonishing accuracy. This was not guesswork, it was applied mathematics of a very high order, a testament to a scholarly tradition that carefully preserved and built upon the geometric knowledge of the ancient Greeks and Romans. This technical expertise was never employed in a vacuum. The master surveyor worked in close consultation with the monastery's abbot or the diocese's bishop, a collaboration that fused the precision of science with the vision of spirituality. Their shared goal was to manifest cosmic harmony on Earth, to build a road that was not only functional, but also a true reflection of the divine order. This is where sacred geometry moved from theoretical concept to physical reality. The surveyor's knowledge of the Pythagorean theorem, for instance, was not merely an abstract geometric rule. It was a practical tool used to ensure that a road turning to approach a cathedral would do so at a perfect right angle, creating a symbolic and energetic alignment of stability and balance. They used this knowledge to create vast, invisible triangles across the landscape, connecting three sacred sites in a stable geometric relationship believed to amplify their spiritual power. Perhaps the most fascinating application was their use of the golden ratio, a proportion of approximately 1.618 to 1, found throughout nature and considered the key to perfect harmony. A surveyor might use this ratio to determine the exact placement of way stations along a pilgrimage route, the distance from the starting town to the first chapel, then from that chapel to the next major cross, and so on, could all be related by this divine proportion. This created a journey that felt instinctively rhythmic and harmonious to the pilgrim, a subliminal experience of beauty and order that eased the physical hardship of the road. The spacing felt right because it was right, mathematically echoing the patterns of growth in a nautilus shell or the arrangement of seeds in a sunflower. The road itself became a slow, unfolding expression of natural law. This mathematical rigor was the only way to achieve the breathtakingly straight alignments we still marvel at today, roads that hold their course for miles while simultaneously staying true to a solstice sunrise or a specific star on the horizon. To do this, the surveyor had to account for the curvature of the Earth, for subtle changes in elevation, and for natural obstacles, all while keeping the ultimate celestial target in mind. It was a feat of long-range planning and unwavering intention that is difficult to overstate. The fact that these alignments remained detectable centuries later, even after generations of repair and slight rerouting, speaks volumes about the sheer skill and unwavering vision of these individuals. They were not just building roads, they were etching lines of permanent prayer into the very body of the Earth, transforming the most abstract spiritual concepts of harmony, order, and cosmic connection into durable, tangible infrastructure that anyone could walk upon. This seamless blend of empirical science and deep faith stands as one of the most sophisticated and enduring achievements of the medieval mind. These ancient pathways were far more than silent stones and packed earth. They were vibrant, living theaters for some of the most powerful communal rituals of the medieval world. The sacred geometry and celestial alignments we've discussed weren't just abstract concepts to be admired from a distance. They were mechanisms to be activated, and the primary method of activation was through collective ceremony. The road itself became a stage, and the entire community became the actors in a drama that connected them to their ancestors, their gods, and the very turning of the cosmos. Consider the great fire festivals like Beltane, marking the beginning of summer, or Samhain, heralding the start of winter and the new year. On these potent nights, the entire village wouldn't simply gather in a static circle. They would embark on a procession along a specific hallowed track that ran the boundary of their lands. This was no casual stroll. As they walked, they would chant, sing, and carry torches, literally and symbolically carrying the light into the darkness or banishing the dark with flame. This act of walking the perimeter was a ritual of purification and protection, a way of defining their sacred space and weaving a web of spiritual safety around their homes and livestock. The path they took was carefully chosen, often one of the old straight tracks that aligned with a significant celestial event, ensuring that their human ceremony was perfectly synchronized with the heavenly cycles it was meant to honor. The fire they carried was not just for light, it was a portable piece of the sun's power, brought down to earth and traced along the energetic lines of the land to recharge and bless it. The journey was punctuated by deliberate pauses at specific, charged points along the route. These were not random rest stops. They were predetermined nodes of power, an ancient standing stone at a crossroads, a venerable oak tree, or a natural spring bubbling from the earth. At each of these points, the procession would halt to perform specific rites. Offerings of bread, ale, or woven garlands might be left to appease the spirits of the place. Prayers would be offered for the fertility of the land in the coming season. In some traditions, a need fire, a flame kindled by friction alone, would be lit at these spots, and each household would take a brand from this sacred source to relight their own hearths, symbolically uniting the entire community with a single, purified flame. These pauses transformed the linear road into a series of powerful spiritual waypoints, each one layering another level of intention and blessing onto the journey. The timing of these rituals was everything, and it was the road's astronomical alignment that made such precise timing possible. A procession meant to greet the dawn on the summer solstice had to begin its walk in the pre-dawn darkness, navigating a path that would ensure they arrived at a specific hilltop or stone circle just as the first sliver of sun broke the horizon. The road was their clock and their calendar. Its alignment guaranteed that their human celebration would achieve that miraculous moment of convergence with the cosmic event. This synchronization was believed to amplify the potency of their prayers and offerings 1,000-fold, creating a fleeting bridge between the human and divine realms. To participate was to feel, in a very tangible way, that your actions were helping to uphold the natural order, that your footsteps were helping the sun to rise or the seasons to turn. This transformed the very nature of travel. For a medieval person, to walk these roads during a festival was not merely transportation, it was a participatory spiritual act. Your physical movement became a form of kinetic prayer. With every step, you were reinforcing the bonds of your community, honoring the memory of those who had walked the same path for generations before you, and affirming your place within the larger, living cycles of nature. The endurance of these traditions, well into the Christian era where they were often adapted into Rogation Day processions or Saints' Day parades, shows how deeply this need was embedded in the cultural psyche. The rituals performed along these sacred pathways were the heartbeat of this spiritual landscape, a rhythmic, recurring practice that kept the ancient significance of the roads alive and thrumming with power, season after season, generation after generation. While the medieval mind was deeply attuned to the spiritual energies of the landscape, they were also inheritors of a staggering engineering legacy from a much earlier era, the Roman Empire. The Romans were, first and foremost, masters of practical infrastructure, and their vast network of roads, the famed Via, were built to move legions and facilitate trade with relentless efficiency. Yet, beneath this pragmatic surface lay a sophisticated understanding of geometry and astronomy that medieval builders would later recognize and repurpose for their own spiritual ends. The Romans didn't just build roads, they imposed a grid of order upon the chaotic natural world, and they did so with tools that were both brilliantly simple and profoundly accurate. The key to their straight, enduring roads was a surveying discipline known as grammatics, centered around an instrument called the groma. This device, consisting of a vertical staff with a crossarm from which plumb bobs were hung, allowed Roman engineers to sight perfect right angles and project dead straight lines across immense distances. This technical prowess enabled the creation of roads like the legendary Via Appia, which slices across the Italian countryside with an almost supernatural straightness, a testament to a civilization that valued order above all else. But Roman order was not merely practical, it was often sacred. The act of founding a city or laying out a road was a religious ceremony. Before construction began, priests known as augurs would read the flight patterns of birds to seek divine approval for the undertaking. The primary survey line, known as the decumanus, was frequently aligned with the east-west path of the sun, while its perpendicular counterpart, the cardo, ran north-south. This created a fundamental cross-shaped template that oriented the entire settlement to the cardinal directions, mirroring the cosmic order of the heavens. A road built along these lines was therefore not just a route for travel. It was a material extension of a celestial blueprint, a physical manifestation of Rome's belief in its divine right to bring structure to the world. This fusion of meticulous engineering with spiritual cosmology created a powerful foundation that would not be forgotten. When the Roman Empire receded, its physical infrastructure remained. Medieval societies found themselves living amidst the bones of a giant enduring stone roads that still connected places, often leading to ruins of forgotten purpose. Rather than discard these pagan pathways, the medieval Christian world performed a remarkable act of spiritual recycling. They recognized the inherent power and utility of these straight, well-built roads and began to sanctify them. A common practice was to repurpose a long, straight Roman road as a new pilgrimage route. Along its length, they would construct churches, monasteries, and shrines, often positioned at the exact sites of former Roman way stations, temples, or forts. This was a deliberate strategy of Christianization to overlay the old pagan power points with new Christian holy sites, effectively baptizing the entire landscape. The road itself remained the same, but its meaning was transformed from an artery of imperial control into a pathway to salvation. Pilgrims walking to Canterbury might not have realized that the firm road beneath their feet was laid by Roman soldiers centuries before, but they were benefiting from its enduring engineering while walking a path now dotted with crosses instead of imperial milestones. This classical influence was most vividly preserved in the layout of medieval towns. Many of the great cities of Europe, like London, Paris, and Cologne, were built directly atop Roman foundations. The medieval street plan often fossilized the ancient Roman grid, with the main market street following the old decumanus and a primary north-south avenue tracing the path of the original cardo. This wasn't just a matter of convenience. It was a subconscious continuation of a spatial logic that associated civic order with cosmic order. The medieval town square, often the site of the cathedral, was frequently the same forum where Romans had gathered. The new cathedral, reaching towards the Christian heaven, was thus anchored to a site that had been a center of communal and spiritual life for 1,000 years. This deep layering of history created a palpable sense of continuity, a feeling that the new faith was not destroying the old world but was instead fulfilling it, building its divine city upon the sturdy, geometric foundations of classical wisdom. The result of this fusion was something entirely unique, a road network that blended Roman rationality with medieval spirituality. The Roman contribution was the bones, the unwavering straight lines, the durable construction, the long-distance vision. The medieval contribution was the soul, the sacred destinations, the symbolic markers, the intentional alignment with a Christianized cosmos. This partnership produced some of the most enduring and powerful sacred pathways in history. It gave us the physical reality of a road that could last for millennia, combined with the spiritual purpose that made the journey along it a transformative experience. The medieval traveler, therefore, was walking a double path, one of ancient imperial stone and one of contemporary, divine grace, a perfect synthesis of the practical and the profound that continues to whisper its secrets from the landscape today. Now let's pause at one of the most potent and psychologically charged points within this entire network, the crossroads. In our modern world, an intersection is simply a utilitarian meeting of paths, a place of traffic lights and directional signs. But for the medieval traveler, a crossroads was something far more profound, a place where the mundane world grew thin, where the veil between the physical and spiritual realms was believed to be permeable and frayed. It was a locus of immense power, a point of decision that represented not just a choice of direction, but a choice of fate. Here, at the precise geometric junction of two sacred pathways, the concentrated energy of the roads was thought to collide and amplify, creating a vortex of spiritual potential that could be either tremendously beneficial or dangerously unstable. This ambivalent nature is perfectly captured by the objects commonly found marking these spots. On one hand, you might find a wayside cross or a small shrine, offering a moment of prayer and divine protection for the traveler faced with a weighty decision. The cross was a symbol of order, faith, and safe passage, an attempt to sanctify this liminal space and keep darker forces at bay. Yet, just as often, the crossroads was also the site of the gallows, where criminals were executed and left as a grim warning. This practice wasn't just about public visibility, it was deeply symbolic. The crossroads, as a nowhere place belonging to neither one road nor the other, was seen as the ideal location to dispose of those who had fallen outside the bounds of societal law. Their restless spirits would be confused and trapped by the conflicting paths, unable to find their way back to haunt the living. This juxtaposition of the sacred cross and the profane gallows reveals the medieval mind's understanding of the crossroads as a place of stark duality, a gateway for both divine blessings and terrifying curses, all depending on how one approached it. This demanded specific rituals from those who passed through. A traveler might pause to leave a small offering, a coin, a scrap of food, a woven strand of hair tossed into the bushes or placed at the base of the cross. This wasn't a bribe, but a respectful payment to the spirits of the place, a recognition of their power, and a plea for safe passage and wise guidance in choosing the correct path. In more ancient traditions that persisted in folklore, crossroads were the domain of deities like the Greek Hecate, the goddess of magic, ghosts, and the moon, who held sway over these in-between places. To encounter her at a crossroads at night was to risk being granted profound wisdom or being led utterly astray into madness. This belief required specific protective measures, from whispered prayers to carrying certain herbs, all designed to navigate the crossroads' power without attracting malicious attention. The spiritual potency of these intersections was often heightened by their design. The most powerful crossroads were those where the roads met at perfect right angles, creating a strong geometric cross shape on the landscape. This wasn't just an aesthetic choice. This precise 90-degree angle was believed to create a stable and powerful container for spiritual energy, much like the cross quarters in a sacred circle. Furthermore, these significant junctions were frequently found to be points where multiple ley lines converged. Imagine the energetic currents of the land flowing along these straight tracks, meeting and swirling together at the crossroads like powerful underground rivers creating a whirlpool. This convergence amplified whatever intention was brought there, making a prayer more potent but also making a curse more dangerous. Some crossroads were even aligned with astronomical events. A specific crossroad might be positioned so that on the equinox, the setting sun would cast the long shadow of the gallows or the wayside cross directly down the center of one of the roads, a chilling celestial alignment that marked it as a place of truly cosmic significance. Understanding the profound role of the crossroads completely changes our perception of the medieval road system. It was not just a network of lines, it was a network of powerful nodes. The long, straight stretches of road were the channels, the conduits that built up and directed energy, but it was at the crossroads where this energy was focused, accessed, and utilized. These points were the control panels, the nervous centers of the entire spiritual landscape. They were places where the traveler had to be most aware, most respectful, and most deliberate. To stand at a medieval crossroads was to stand at the heart of a vast, invisible web of meaning, feeling the pull of multiple destinies and the palpable presence of the unseen world, all converging on a single, powerful point of choice. This powerful symbolic language of the road extended far beyond the physical landscape, weaving its way into the very fabric of medieval visual culture, from the grandeur of heraldic shields to the intricate pages of illuminated manuscripts. In an age where few could read, art and symbolism were the primary texts, and the imagery of the path became one of its most potent and recurring alphabets. A knight's coat of arms was more than a personal identifier. It was a visual resume of his values, his ancestry, and his life's purpose. When a winding path or a straight road appeared emblazoned upon his shield, it communicated a profound narrative to all who saw it. This symbol could represent a family's historic commitment to a specific pilgrimage route, a vow to protect the pathways of the realm, or a metaphorical declaration that the bearer's lineage was on a righteous journey toward honor and glory. It transformed the knight from a mere warrior into a wayfarer, his entire identity framed as a sacred quest, his life a path to be walked with courage and faith. This metaphor found its most exquisite expression within the glowing pages of illuminated manuscripts, created by monastic scribes who were masters of spiritual symbolism. Here, roads were rarely depicted as simple strips of brown paint. They were brilliant golden avenues, streams of celestial light cutting through dark landscapes, leading the eye and the soul inevitably toward salvation. In a Book of Hours, a personal prayer book, you might see an illustration of a soul's journey toward the heavenly Jerusalem. The path is narrow and fraught with symbolic dangers, but it is unmistakably straight and true, guided by the hand of God. The destination is often shown as a radiant city on a hill, its gates open, awaiting the faithful traveler. This visual storytelling reinforced a central tenet of medieval Christianity, that life itself was a pilgrimage, a linear progression from the earthly city to the city of God, and that staying on the path of virtue was the only way to reach that glorious end. The artistic connection to the physical sacred geometry we find in the landscape is perhaps most striking in the frequent use of labyrinth and spiral motifs. The Great Labyrinth set into the floor of Chartres Cathedral is the most famous example, but these patterns were reproduced in countless manuscripts and church murals. These were not puzzles to be solved, but symbolic roads to be walked, a microcosm of the long pilgrimage to Jerusalem compressed into a manageable, meditative circuit. To walk the Chartres Labyrinth was to embark on a spiritual journey without ever leaving the cathedral, to trace a path that turned back on itself yet always progressed toward the center, representing the soul's twisting path toward God. The geometric precision of these designs, their perfect symmetry and harmonic proportions, directly mirrored the mathematical principles used to lay out the actual pilgrimage routes outside. Art imitated life, and life, in turn, was designed to reflect this divine art. This pervasive imagery reveals something fundamental about the medieval mindset. The line between the physical and the metaphysical was beautifully blurred. A real road and a painted road were understood to be part of the same continuum of meaning. Walking a physical pilgrimage route and tracing a painted labyrinth with your finger were both valid forms of spiritual travel. This symbolic system provided a framework for understanding existence itself. The trials of daily life, the hardships, the choices, the moments of joy could all be interpreted as events on this internal road. A crossroads in a story represented a moral dilemma. A steep hill represented a period of struggle and effort. A clear, straight path represented a time of grace and divine favor. The enduring power of this symbolism is its timelessness. It taps into a universal human experience, the journey. We still speak of life as a path, of being at a crossroads, of searching for our way. Medieval art codified this universal experience into a rich visual language that offered both comfort and guidance. It assured the viewer that their journey, however difficult, had a destination and a purpose. It transformed the anxiety of being lost into the hope of being found, simply by reminding everyone that they were, in fact, always on a road designed by a divine geometer, leading them home. This artistic legacy is a master key, unlocking not just how medieval people built their roads, but how they understood their very lives, seeing every individual story as a unique and sacred pathway woven into the grand tapestry of creation. Yet for all their celestial ambition and geometric precision, these sacred pathways were never divorced from the gritty realities of the earth they traversed. They were a profound negotiation, a constant dialogue between spiritual idealism and environmental necessity. The master builders and geomancers who plotted these routes faced a formidable challenge: how to impose a divine, mathematical order upon a landscape that was gloriously unpredictable, shaped by relentless weather, dramatic topography, and the changing of the seasons. Their genius lay not in conquering this natural world, but in collaborating with it, weaving their sacred intentions into the very fabric of the hills, valleys, and rivers. The result was a network of roads that felt organically emergent from the land itself, yet pulsed with a deeper, intentional harmony. Consider the practical wisdom of routing a road along a high ridge line. While this might seem like the most difficult path, it was often the most spiritually and practically astute choice. High ground offered dry, well-drained travel away from the swampy miasma of the valleys, which were often seen as realms of sickness and malevolent spirits. But more importantly, an elevated path provided an unobstructed sightline to the horizon, a crucial requirement for a road designed to capture the first ray of the solstice sunrise or to align with a specific star's rising point. The Ridgeway in England is a perfect testament to this. Its course along the chalk downs was chosen not for ease, but for celestial connection. Similarly, a road might plunge into a valley not as a detour, but as a deliberate pilgrimage to a sacred water source. Holy wells and springs, believed to be points of healing and divine communication, were powerful nodes in the spiritual landscape. A pathway was therefore carefully directed to approach these sites, allowing travelers to collect blessed water, perform rituals, and absorb the beneficent energy of the place. The road served as a conduit, linking the high solar energies of the ridge tops with the deep lunar energies of the healing springs, creating a complete spiritual circuit across the terrain. In regions of dramatic geography like the Alps or the Pyrenees, this negotiation became an art form. Here, the rigid straight line of sacred geometry had to adapt to survive. The solution was often breathtakingly clever, the incorporation of the land's natural drama into the sacred pattern itself. A steep mountain pass couldn't be ascended by a straight road, so engineers designed switchbacks, a series of tight, zig-zagging turns that carved a path up the slope. But these were not random turns. The number of bends, the angle of ascent, and the overall pattern often reflected sacred spirals or even the circuits of a labyrinth. To walk these roads was to physically trace a meditative pattern into the side of the mountain, transforming a grueling physical climb into a slow, deliberate, and profoundly symbolic ascent towards the heavens. The mountain itself became the cathedral wall, and the road was the prayer etched into its face. Seasonal patterns also dictated the rhythm of these roads. A route that was perfect in the summer sun could become a treacherous, flooded bog in the spring thaw. Medieval builders were keen observers of these cycles and adapted their designs accordingly. Roads were often aligned to run along sun-facing slopes, especially in northern climates, to maximize exposure to the weak winter sun, melting ice and snow, and ensuring the path remained passable for longer periods. In flood-prone areas, causeways were built on raised berms, or the road was deliberately routed just high enough above a river's floodplain to avoid seasonal inundation. This wasn't just about convenience, it was about maintaining the sacred function of the road as a perennial channel of energy and travel. A road that was swallowed by floods for half the year could not serve its purpose as a stable spiritual conduit. This pragmatic adaptability demonstrates that sacred geometry was never a rigid, inflexible dogma. It was a living, breathing set of principles that could be creatively applied to work in concert with the environment, not in opposition to it. This harmonious balance between the ideal straight line and the necessary curve, between cosmic alignment and earthly practicality, is what gives these ancient roads their enduring power and beauty. They are a permanent reminder that true sacredness is not found by escaping the natural world, but by deeply, respectfully, and intelligently engaging with it. The enduring presence of these ancient pathways is not confined to history books or forgotten maps. They are living, breathing artifacts that continue to shape our modern world in surprising and profound ways. Perhaps the most visible legacy is the enduring popularity of pilgrimage routes that have seen a remarkable resurgence in recent decades. The Camino de Santiago, for instance, now welcomes over 300,000 pilgrims each year from all corners of the globe. But the motivations have expanded beyond purely religious devotion. While many still walk for faith, others undertake the journey for personal challenge, historical curiosity, or as a form of walking meditation to find clarity in a noisy world. This modern pilgrimage illustrates a universal, timeless human need, the transformative power of a long, intentional journey taken on foot. The Camino, and routes like it, provide a structured space for introspection and community that feels radically authentic in our digital age, proving that the old roads still hold the power to change lives. This fascination extends beyond physical travel into the realm of ideas, where concepts like ley lines and sacred geometry have found a vibrant new life within modern alternative spirituality and wellness movements. While Alfred Watkins's original theory was archaeological, today these invisible alignments are often interpreted as channels of Earth energy or vibrational frequencies. Practitioners of dowsing, Reiki, and geomancy use these concepts to identify powerful spots for meditation, healing, or building homes. Books, documentaries, and online communities passionately debate the locations of these lines, often using modern GPS coordinates to map them with a precision Watkins could never have imagined. This isn't merely a revival of superstition. It represents a deep-seated longing to re-enchant our landscape, to see the world as interconnected and spiritually charged in an era often dominated by stark materialism. The ancient roads provide a tangible hook for this intuition, a physical trace on the land that suggests a hidden order waiting to be rediscovered. Often unbeknownst to its residents, the very skeleton of a modern European city is frequently the ghost of its medieval self. Urban planners and developers, while focused on contemporary needs like traffic flow and zoning, are often constrained by the street patterns laid down centuries ago. The main thoroughfare of a bustling modern town might perfectly follow the course of a medieval pilgrimage road, simply because that was the original route from the gate to the abbey. The central square, now filled with cafes and tourists, was likely the medieval market cross, itself built at the intersection of two powerful ley lines. This creates a fascinating palimpsest effect where a contemporary city grid is actually a layer superimposed upon a much older, sacred blueprint. We drive to work, shop for groceries, and meet friends for dinner along routes that were originally designed for solemn processions and celestial observances, our mundane daily routines unconsciously playing out upon a stage of ancient spiritual significance. Recognizing this incredible value, there has been a concerted international effort to preserve these routes not just as historical curiosities, but as active heritage sites. Organizations like UNESCO have designated the Camino de Santiago and Via Francigena as World Heritage Sites, protecting them from development and ensuring their maintenance for future generations. In England, the Ridgeway is a designated national trail, its path carefully managed to allow public access while preserving its archaeological integrity. This official recognition elevates these roads from mere footpaths to monuments of human ingenuity and spiritual expression, acknowledging that their value lies not in their utility alone, but in their ability to tell a profound story about who we are and where we have come from. The tools for understanding this story are now more powerful than ever. Modern archaeologists and geographers are using cutting-edge technology to analyze these ancient networks with fresh eyes. Satellite imagery and LiDAR, which uses laser pulses to map the ground even through dense forest canopy, are revealing the breathtaking geometric precision of these roads with startling clarity. From space, researchers can identify straight alignments that run for dozens of miles, connecting sites across regions in patterns that are impossible to dismiss as coincidence. Geographic Information System software allows them to overlay maps of ancient roads with charts of astronomical events, proving with mathematical certainty the solstice and equinox alignments that were once matters of faith and tradition. This scientific validation doesn't strip the roads of their mystery. It deepens it, revealing a level of planning and astronomical knowledge that forces us to radically reconsider the capabilities of our ancestors. This enduring legacy, from the footsteps of a modern pilgrim to the digital maps of a satellite archaeologist, speaks to something fundamental in the human spirit. It is a testament to our timeless desire to find meaning in movement, to transform mere travel into a journey, and to inscribe our deepest beliefs upon the very face of the earth. These roads are a bridge across centuries, reminding us that the landscape is not just a resource to be used, but a text to be read, filled with the stories, prayers, and celestial wisdom of those who walked before us. Their persistence is a quiet, constant invitation to look up from our hectic lives, to see the hidden patterns that connect us to the past, and to perhaps find a little more magic in the paths we walk every day. It's absolutely captivating to consider these ancient pathways as a perfect network of mystical energy lines and celestial alignments, a secret science lost to time. But to truly honor the intelligence of our ancestors, we must also embrace a more nuanced view, one that separates compelling theory from verifiable fact. The human mind is a pattern-seeking engine, and when we look at a map dotted with ancient sites, it's incredibly easy to draw straight lines between them and proclaim a grand design. In many cases, however, what we're seeing is a fascinating blend of intention, coincidence, and pragmatic adaptation to the landscape. Not every straight track is a ley line charged with earth energy. Some are simply the most efficient route between 2 points, following a natural ridge for dry footing or a valley for easier passage. The relentless practicality of medieval builders cannot be overstated. They were masterful engineers who worked with the materials and topography available to them. A road might curve to avoid a swamp not because it was avoiding bad energy, but because building a causeway through a bog was immensely difficult and time-consuming. They prioritized durability, safety, and ease of travel, objectives that often naturally resulted in straight or gently curving paths that our modern eyes might interpret as spiritually significant. This isn't to dismiss the idea of intentional alignments, but rather to refine it. The key is to look for patterns that defy mere practicality. This is where interdisciplinary evidence becomes so powerful. Take, for instance, the case of a road that runs perfectly straight for miles, directly connecting a Neolithic burial mound to a medieval church, but which also forces travelers to slog up a steep hill and cross a treacherous river ford. A purely pragmatic engineer would have chosen an easier route around the obstacle. The fact that the harder, more direct path was chosen suggests something else was at play, a deliberate intention to preserve a specific alignment, perhaps one that held ancestral or astronomical significance. Archaeoastronomy provides some of the strongest support for these intentional designs. When sophisticated software can demonstrate that a road's orientation captures the sunrise on a specific solstice with a degree of accuracy that cannot be random, we are moving from speculation into the realm of demonstrable knowledge. This is no longer just a feeling, it's a reproducible observation that points to a sophisticated understanding of solar and lunar cycles. The danger of romanticizing the past is that it can actually diminish the real, tangible achievements of these cultures. Attributing every straight road to mystical earth energies can overlook the genuine engineering marvels they accomplished with simple tools and profound skill. It risks turning our ancestors into mystical figures rather than the intelligent, observant, and deeply spiritual people they truly were. Their world, you did not separate the practical from the sacred. these concepts were intertwined. Building a sturdy, well-drained road was a spiritual act because it facilitated pilgrimage and connected a community to its holy sites. The true sophistication lies in this holistic blend. They didn't need to choose between building a good road and building a sacred one. In their minds, a road could not be truly good unless it was also sacred. Therefore, a balanced perspective doesn't take away the magic. It grounds it in a more profound respect for historical reality, by applying critical thinking, by asking, what is the simplest explanation? And then seeking evidence to confirm or deny it, we get closer to understanding the authentic mindset of the medieval world. We can appreciate that while some alignments are indeed coincidental, others reveal a breathtaking intentionality that speaks to a deep desire to harmonize human life with the larger rhythms of the cosmos. This approach allows us to celebrate the genuine mysteries without needing to resort to exaggeration, revealing a past that is both wonderfully complex and brilliantly practical. Imagine peering down from space, not with human eyes, but with the penetrating gaze of technology that can strip away forests, fields, and even centuries of urban development to reveal the ghostly outlines of ancient pathways hidden just beneath the surface. This is the revolutionary power of modern tools like LiDAR, which uses laser pulses to create incredibly detailed three-dimensional maps of the Earth's surface. From an airplane, these lasers fire down at the ground, and by measuring the time it takes for each pulse to return, they can build a picture of the terrain with centimeter-level accuracy. What makes this so extraordinary for archaeology is its ability to see through obstacles. A dense canopy of leaves becomes virtually transparent, and what emerges from the data is the unmistakable imprint of a road that hasn't been walked for 1,000 years, a raised berm, a subtle ditch, a straight line cutting through a modern landscape that had completely forgotten it was ever there. This isn't just guesswork anymore. It's like suddenly being able to read a hidden text that's been written into the very soil. This technological leap is complemented by the vast eye-in-the-sky perspective of satellite imagery. Platforms like Google Earth have democratized this view, allowing amateur researchers and academics alike to scan entire continents from their desks, identifying straight tracks and geometric relationships between sites that are impossible to perceive from the ground. When you're standing in a field, a slight rise in the earth might look like a natural hillock, but from above, that same feature connects perfectly with a distant church spire and a far-off standing stone, revealing itself as part of a deliberate, straight alignment. This macro view allows us to see the forest for the trees, or more accurately, the network for the paths. We can trace a road's entire course across dozens of miles, observing how it holds its alignment over hill and valley, a clear sign of intentional planning rather than a route that simply meanders along the path of least resistance. But collecting the data is only half the story. The real magic happens with geographic information systems, or GIS software. This is the digital brain that makes sense of it all. Researchers can feed all this information, LiDAR maps, satellite photos, historical records, and the precise coordinates of ancient monuments into a sophisticated computer program. The software can then perform analyses that would have been the stuff of science fiction a generation ago. It can calculate with mathematical certainty whether a specific stretch of road was aligned to the rising sun on the summer solstice 2,000 years ago, accounting for the subtle changes in the Earth's axis over millennia. It can map the precise intersections of multiple ley lines and see if they correlate with a higher density of sacred sites. It can even create digital elevation models that remove all modern development, simulating what the pristine landscape would have looked like to a Bronze Age surveyor, allowing us to understand the choices they made with a whole new level of empathy and clarity. The revelations have been nothing short of breathtaking. In the United Kingdom, LIDAR surveys have exposed the stunning straightness of lost sections of the Roman road known as the Devil's Highway, showing how medieval and modern roads often snake alongside these much older, more direct routes. This provides tangible proof of how sacred geography was often layered, with each new generation recognizing the power of a location and building upon it, even if the original reason for its placement was forgotten. In the jungles of Central America, this technology has uncovered entirely new networks of Maya Sakbiob, the white plaster roads that connected cities and temples, revealing a civilization far more interconnected and geographically ordered than previously believed. These aren't just discoveries, they are validations, providing the hard, empirical evidence that confirms what was once dismissed as the fringe theory of lay hunters, that our ancestors did indeed impose a profound and intelligent order upon their world. Perhaps most importantly, this marriage of cutting-edge science and historical inquiry is not just about proving old theories right or wrong, it's a powerful tool for preservation. By digitally mapping these fragile archaeological features, we create a permanent record of them before they are lost forever to agriculture, urban expansion, or climate change. A digital reconstruction can ensure that the precise alignment of a road is preserved in perpetuity, even if the physical path itself one day fades away. This technology opens a window into the past, but it also builds a bridge to the future, ensuring that the incredible engineering and spiritual wisdom of these ancient pathways remains a living, breathing part of our shared human story for generations to come. There's a profound and often overlooked dimension to these ancient roads that goes beyond stone and alignment, a deep psychological power intentionally woven into their very design. For the medieval pilgrim, the journey was never just a test of physical endurance. It was a meticulously crafted experience for the mind and spirit. The rhythmic, repetitive act of placing one foot in front of the other for mile after mile, day after day, had a powerful, trance-inducing effect. This was no accident. The steady, metronomic pace of walking quieted the chatter of the everyday mind, allowing deeper thoughts and reflections to surface. The road itself became a moving meditation, a long, quiet corridor that led inward as much as it led toward a distant shrine. This deliberate pacing, combined with the constant, gentle focus required to navigate the path, created the perfect conditions for what we would now call mindfulness, a state of present moment awareness that reduces stress and fosters mental clarity. The ancient planners understood this intuitively, designing routes that facilitated this inner journey as assuredly as they guided the outer one. This psychological architecture was further enhanced by the strategic placement of landmarks along the route. A traveler wouldn't simply walk an endless, monotonous track. The journey was punctuated by a carefully sequenced series of meaningful waypoints, a weathered cross atop a hill, a humble chapel offering shelter, a sacred well nestled in a grove. Each of these points served as a psychological milestone, breaking the immense journey into manageable, meaningful segments. Reaching one provided a tangible sense of progress, a small victory that renewed hope and stamina. More importantly, each landmark offered a specific focus for contemplation. A cross might inspire reflections on sacrifice and faith, while a healing spring could prompt thoughts on purification and renewal. This transformed the road from a mere physical space into a narrative, a story in which the pilgrim was the main character, moving through chapters of challenge, reflection, and gradual transformation. The path was no longer just dirt beneath their feet. It was a timeline of their own evolving internal state. Modern psychology now offers a fascinating scientific lens to understand this ancient wisdom. Studies on the effects of walking labyrinths, those intricate, circuitous paths used for centuries as a spiritual tool, show that the very act of following a set path can significantly lower cortisol levels, reduce anxiety, and enhance cognitive flexibility. The brain, relieved of the constant need to make navigational decisions, enters a state of relaxed focus. This same principle applies to walking a long, predetermined road. The pilgrim's mind is freed from the countless minor choices that fill everyday life, allowing mental energy to be redirected toward introspection and processing. Furthermore, the immersive experience of being in nature, a constant on these ancient routes, adds another layer of psychological benefit. The combination of physical exercise, fresh air, and natural scenery is a proven antidote to modern stresses, creating a perfect environment for mental and emotional reset. This explains the enduring, almost magnetic appeal of routes like the Camino de Santiago today. People are drawn to them not solely for religious reasons, but for this powerful, evidence-based psychological recalibration. Ultimately, this reveals the breathtaking foresight of the medieval mind. They designed these roads with a holistic understanding of human nature that we are only now beginning to fully appreciate with our scientific tools. They recognized a fundamental human need for purpose and connection, a need to feel part of a story larger than oneself. The sacred road answered this need perfectly. It provided a clear, tangible purpose to reach a destination. It fostered connection to the countless pilgrims who had walked before, to the communities offering hospitality along the way, and to the natural and celestial worlds through which the path wound. Every element, from the grand solar alignment to the placement of a simple bench overlooking a valley, was intended to support the traveler's complete well-being. The road was a therapeutic landscape, a tool for self-discovery built into the very earth, demonstrating that the most profound journeys have always been the ones that change us from the inside out. While our journey has largely followed the winding tracks of medieval Europe, if we lift our gaze to a global scale, we encounter a breathtaking phenomenon. Across vast oceans and entirely disconnected continents, human civilizations independently arrived at the same profound conclusion, that a road could be so much more than a path. It could be a sacred act of creation. Consider the Maya of Mesoamerica, master astronomers and mathematicians who constructed what they called sakbiob, literally, white roads. These were not mere trails but raised causeways, paved with limestone plaster that gleamed brilliantly under the tropical sun, connecting great cities like Chichen Itza and Kaaba. Their alignments were meticulously calculated, not just for efficient travel, but to mirror the celestial dance they observed so intently. Certain sakbiob are aligned with the extreme rising and setting points of Venus, a planet central to their cosmology and warfare rituals, while others frame the solstice sun, turning the road into a terrestrial echo of the heavens. These white ribbons cutting through the dense jungle were physical manifestations of a belief in cosmic order, straight lines drawn through a chaotic world to connect the realms of the gods with the world of humans. Travel now to the Indian subcontinent, where an ancient tradition of sacred architecture known as Vastu Shastra provided the blueprint for spiritual order. Like its Chinese counterpart Feng Shui, Vastu is a science of harmonious placement, governing the construction of everything from a humble home to a vast temple complex. The roads and pathways leading to these temples were not afterthoughts. They were integral components of this sacred geometry. The approach to a temple was designed as a gradual process of purification and preparation for the devotee. The path might be aligned along precise cardinal directions, often with the main entrance facing east to receive the first, most sacred rays of the sun. The geometry governed every aspect, the proportions of the gateways, the sequential arrangement of courtyards, and the specific distances between ritual markers along the road. Walking this prescribed path was a journey through a symbolic cosmos, moving from the profane outer world toward the sacred, geometrically perfect center of the inner sanctum. The road itself was a prerequisite for the spiritual experience that awaited at its end. What is truly staggering about these parallels is the complete absence of any possible contact between these cultures. The medieval European monks laying out a Camino, the Maya engineers plastering a Sakbi, and the Indian masters of Vastu Shastra were working in total isolation from one another. Yet they all arrived at the same set of powerful tools: astronomy, geometry, and spiritual symbolism. This suggests something fundamental about the human psyche, a universal impulse to find meaning in the landscape and to impose our understanding of cosmic order upon it. We seem to be hardwired to connect points of power, whether they are hilltop temples, burial mounds, or sacred springs, with straight lines. It is a deep-seated desire to weave our world into a coherent, meaningful tapestry, to create a map that reflects not just geography but belief. This shared human drive transforms the random chaos of nature into a designed, intentional, and holy landscape. This global perspective fundamentally changes how we view the medieval European roads. They are no longer a unique, isolated occurrence, but rather a powerful local expression of a worldwide human tradition. The stonemasons of Chartres were participating in the same grand, universal project as the architects of Angkor Wat or the surveyors of Teotihuacan. Each culture used the language it knew best: the Maya their precise Venus cycles, the Indians their Vastu mandalas, the Europeans their Christianized celestial alignments and sacred geometry, but the underlying grammar was the same. Recognizing this doesn't diminish the uniqueness of each tradition. Instead, it elevates them all. It reveals that our ancestors, wherever they were, looked up at the same stars and felt the same urge to build pathways that reached for them, creating sacred roads that served as the enduring spines of their spiritual worlds. The incredible legacy of these ancient pathways is not locked away in history books or hidden behind museum glass. It is alive and well, waiting for you to step outside and walk directly into the past. For anyone feeling the call to explore, countless miles of these sacred routes remain remarkably preserved and fully accessible to modern travelers. Imagine lacing up your boots and setting out on England's Ridgeway, one of the oldest roads in the world, feeling the same chalky turf underfoot that supported Neolithic traders, Bronze Age herdsmen, and medieval pilgrims. Or consider joining the ever-growing stream of modern wayfarers on the Camino de Santiago, a journey that has seen a breathtaking revival, with over 300,000 people from all walks of life making the trek each year. This isn't about recreating a historical reenactment. It's about forging a personal connection to a timeless human tradition of seeking meaning through movement. To truly unlock the hidden layers of these paths, a little preparation can transform a simple hike into a profound discovery. Before you go, dive into the wealth of resources now available. Smartphone apps and detailed guidebooks can point you to the subtle wonders you might otherwise miss. You can use your phone's GPS to stand at a specific point on the Ridgeway and watch as the sun crests the horizon on the winter solstice, perfectly aligning the ancient trackway just as it did thousands of years ago. Digital maps can overlay the old routes onto modern landscapes, revealing how your walk through a contemporary French village is actually tracing the precise line of a Roman road that once carried legionnaires. Many local museums and heritage centers along these routes, like the excellent one in Castrodruz on the Camino, are treasure troves of context, displaying artifacts found along the path and explaining the sacred significance of the landmarks you're about to encounter. This knowledge turns random piles of stone into purposeful waymarkers and a simple forest into a once sacred grove. the most rewarding way to experience these roads is to engage with them mindfully. This goes beyond just covering the miles. It's about intention. Pause at a moss-covered wayside cross. Place your hand on it and consider the countless other travelers who have done the same, seeking comfort, guidance, or simply a moment of rest. Find a quiet spot beside a holy well that has been a source of water and wonder for centuries, and just listen to the silence. If your timing is right, plan your journey around a celestial event. Be present at a known solstice alignment, like at the Nine Ladies Stone Circle on Stanton Moor in England, and witness the same sunrise that guided our ancestors. This mindful approach is how you bridge the centuries. It's not about pretending you live in the past. It's about allowing the past to inform your present, creating a personal, experiential understanding of the spiritual weight these roads carry. Whether you're driven by a thirst for adventure, a need for quiet reflection, or a pure historical curiosity, these journeys offer a unique and powerful form of insight. The physical challenge of the road, the blisters, the fatigue, the changing weather becomes a grounding force, stripping away the distractions of modern life and fostering a deep sense of presence. With every step, you are quite literally walking in the footsteps of medieval pilgrims, of Roman soldiers, of prehistoric traders. This tangible connection is something no documentary or book can ever fully provide. You become part of the road's ongoing story, a new link in a chain of travelers that stretches back into the mists of time. By choosing to walk these paths with respect and curiosity, you do more than just learn about history. You help to keep its legacy alive, ensuring that these sacred threads in the landscape continue to be felt and understood for generations to come. Ancient roads were far more than mere paths. They were the carefully designed nervous system of a living, spiritual landscape. They connected far more than just towns and villages. They wove together the heavens and the earth, the practical and the profound, into a single, harmonious whole. Think about that for a moment. The very ground beneath our ancestors' feet was a canvas for a grand design, a design that incorporated the invisible energy of ley lines, the majestic clockwork of astronomical alignments, and the divine mathematics of sacred geometry. These routes were not accidents of geography. They were intentional creations, the product of a worldview that saw no separation between the journey of the body and the journey of the soul. To walk these roads was to participate in a cosmic dance, to physically trace a line of prayer and intention across the body of the earth itself. This incredible intentionality reveals a depth of understanding that we are only now, with our modern technology, beginning to fully appreciate. It was an understanding of the cosmos, seen in the precise orientation of a road to capture the solstice sunrise. It was an understanding of the earth, felt in the reverence for natural landmarks and the perceived flow of telluric energy. And perhaps most fascinatingly, it was an understanding of human psychology, crafting journeys that used rhythm, hardship, and symbolic milestones to facilitate inner transformation and mental clarity. This wasn't just engineering, it was a holistic science of the human spirit, designed to guide travelers not only to a physical destination but toward a state of grace. When we choose to walk these ancient pathways today, we are doing so much more than taking a scenic hike. We are stepping into a river of history and meaning, participating in a timeless tradition of seekers who have used the simple, rhythmic act of walking to find connection and purpose. Each footfall on the old stones of the Camino or the grassy turf of the Ridgeway is an echo of countless pilgrims, traders, and wanderers who came before us. We become part of the road's ongoing story, a new link in a chain that stretches back into the deep past. This connection can be profoundly grounding, offering a powerful sense of perspective in our fast-paced modern world. The enduring legacy of these roads challenges us to fundamentally shift how we see the world around us. It invites us to look at our own landscapes with new eyes, to search for the hidden patterns and forgotten connections that might lie just beneath the surface of our everyday lives. That straight country lane leading to an old church, the peculiar alignment of a city street with a distant hill, these could be the faint, lingering echoes of that ancient sacred geography. These pathways stand as a permanent reminder that our ancestors sought to build a world of meaning, purpose, and beautiful order. They encourage us to find those same principles in our own lives, to create our own connections, and to remember that sometimes the most profound journeys are the ones that change us from the inside out. Thank you for walking this path of discovery with us. If you've enjoyed unraveling these medieval mysteries with us, be sure to subscribe for more journeys into the past and let us know in the comments which ancient road you'd most